Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we descend again into the hollows and heartwood of the old ranges where time folds. Voices linger, and sometimes the wind carries things it shouldn't. A house that forgets its own walls. A thread that grows beneath your skin. A mirror that remembers you differently each time you pass. If you find comfort in the strange and the sacred, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's heard their name in the dark and didn't answer. Now hush the world. And now, we return to what should have stayed buried. It was early October when I found the house. Not marked on any map I owned, but square in the middle of Wise County, Virginia. I'd been hiking a disused trail looking for old homestead remains. Local history is more of a hobby than a job, but I take it seriously. Most of the houses out here are reduced to chimney stones and collapsed roofs. But this one was still whole. The roof sagged but hadn't caved. The windows were cloudy but unbroken, and a faded blue curtain moved slightly in the windless air. I stood there for a long minute, not writing anything down, not taking a picture, just staring. Inside, it smelled of time. That dry, bitter scent of wood left too long to forget itself. The floor creaked the way you'd expect, but not under my feet above me. Every step I took on the warped boards was matched by a step from the second floor. Not delayed, not echoing, perfectly in sync. I froze and looked up, trying to remember if I'd seen stairs outside. I hadn't. I moved again. So did the thing upstairs. I backed out onto the porch, heart kicking once hard, then slow. Silence again. The second I stepped back inside, the footsteps resumed. Precisely over my head. I should have left. I know that now. Instead, I found the staircase. It had been behind a warped door, nearly fused to the frame with damp. When I pushed it open, the air shifted cooler, tighter, like a breath being held. The steps were intact, narrow, climbing up into a dim hallway. I told myself I'd go halfway, take a look, document what I could, and turn back. But the moment my foot hit the fourth step, something changed. The house gave a low, wood-deep groan, like it had just remembered something. That's when the stairs stopped looking like stairs. I was still climbing, but everything around me, it wasn't right anymore. I should have seen the upstairs landing after 8 steps. I counted 15, 20. The walls began to bow outward, not like they were collapsing, but like they didn't remember how to hold a hallway. The dim light shifted no longer natural, not really a light at all, more like the memory of light. I turned to go back down and found only more stairs, rising and falling and looping, with no end. But I'd heard those footsteps something had been up here. So I kept going, up one more flight. At the top, the air opened. I expected a hall, maybe a bedroom with a window. Instead, I stepped into an open forest, tall trees rising around me, mist curling along the ground. But I hadn't left the house. Behind me, the doorframe still stood, freestanding in the middle of the clearing. The wood beneath my boots was floorboard, not forest, but as I looked around, the trees didn't move. No wind, no birds, just vertical silence. It looked like every Appalachian hollow I'd ever walked. But wrong, too symmetrical, too expectant. I tried to step back through the door. The frame was still there, but there was no interior beyond it, just more forest. I even reached through, half expecting to feel the stair rail or the sagging wallpaper. But there was nothing, just air that didn't feel like air. It pressed back. Not cold, not warm, just certain. I walked forward instead. The forest floor creaked like floorboards with every step, though no leaves rustled, no twigs snapped, only that same weight beneath me. Like I was still in the house, only the house no longer knew it had walls. I pulled out my compass. North shifted each time I moved, spinning slightly like it couldn't settle on where I was. I turned a full circle and saw that same freestanding doorframe from 3 different angles. I blinked, stepped left. It disappeared. I turned again. Now it was to my right. The forest hadn't changed, but I had moved. Or hadn't. I don't know how to explain it. It was like the place knew I was trying to leave and was offended I'd tried to navigate. Then I heard the footsteps again. Not above me this time, just behind, moving in perfect sync with my own. I walked faster, they matched, I stopped. So did they. But I swear, the last echo came 1/2 step too late, like whatever followed had forgotten how close it was supposed to be. I turned and saw nothing. But the moment I turned back, a shadow darted through the trees, no detail. Just a difference in the light. Like something walking behind the bark. I ran. I don't know how far. The trees didn't end, but the light began to shift, becoming warm. Almost sunset. But when I checked my watch, it was still early morning. I reached into my pack for my journal. Page after page was blank. Except one, where I'd written earlier saw cabin. West-facing window intact. Blue curtain moving. Only now. There was a second line I hadn't written. Don't climb the stairs. It's already inside. I should have dropped the journal and run, but I held onto it like a lifeline, flipping back through pages that no longer made sense. Things I knew I'd written notes on cabin placement, rough sketches of ridge lines. Dates were gone, replaced with unfamiliar entries, all in my handwriting. It remembers differently. The roof is the ground. Stay in motion, or the door forgets you. Each one carved into the page with growing pressure. Like I'd written them under duress, I couldn't remember. My pen was still warm in my pocket, but I hadn't touched it since the stairs. I followed the last bit of light between the trees, thinking I might find the edge of whatever this was. The trail, if you could call it that, grew tighter the longer I walked. Branches leaned inward, not just overgrown, but intentional, like they'd moved to block me. I ducked through and pressed forward until I saw something that didn't belong, a chair. An old wooden chair, the same blue-gray as the curtain I'd seen in the house, sitting right in the center of a clearing that hadn't been there seconds before. I took a step toward it, and the trees behind me closed, branches knitting together like thread. I didn't look back. On the chair was a photograph. Me, standing in front of the cabin. Only, I wasn't alone. Something pale and tall stood behind me in the image, half blurred, with its hand resting on my shoulder. My face didn't register its presence. I looked calm, focused. That's when I realized I hadn't actually taken any photos that morning. I'd thought about it, even reached for my camera once, but I never clicked the shutter. So how was there a picture I turned the photo over? Written in the same scrawl as the journal, "The house sees you now." It doesn't blink. I pocketed the photo and kept moving, no longer trusting the direction of anything. Eventually, the floor under my boots softened leaves. Moss. The real forest again. I heard distant water. A creek, maybe, and I ran toward it. My breath caught when I reached the bank. The stream was familiar, not from this trip, but from another 2 years back. I knew the rock outcrop across the way. I'd eaten lunch there on a hike through this exact part of Wise County. Only then, the cabin hadn't existed. I was sure of it. I'd have marked it, photographed it, logged it like I always do. But when I turned around, there it was again. The cabin, identical, sitting just beyond the tree line. Only now, the blue curtain was gone. The window was open, no breeze, but the curtain lay draped on the sill, as if someone had just leaned out. I stepped forward slowly. My GPS flickered to life on my wrist, and I saw the coordinates shift wildly, miles jumping in seconds. Elevation data blanking out, then returning. It pinged a location that didn't exist. Latitude too far south, longitude off by thousands. I tapped the screen. It reset, then showed one word instead of numbers inside. I backed away again. I yelled, thinking maybe a ranger, another hiker. Someone might hear. But my voice didn't echo. It sounded like it fell straight down. Swallowed. The ground beneath me flexed once. A ripple like something had exhaled beneath the soil. My compass spun again, wildly now, before freezing, pointing straight back to the cabin. I tried to turn it, shake it. The needle stayed locked. That's when I realized the shadow from the trees was moving. Not from light, from something walking just beyond vision. I found my way out. It was hours later, if I ever really did. I followed the creek, found a familiar ridge, and came out near the old service road where I'd parked. My truck was there, keys still in my pack, but the forest line looked different, like the trees had rearranged themselves slightly. I drove straight back to town, never looking in the rear view more than I had to. The next day, I returned with a friend. We searched the area. The cabin wasn't there. No sign it had ever been. But where it should have stood, we found wood fragments, aged and crumbling. No floor, no stairs, just earth, like it had sunken or faded, or been remembered wrong. Sometimes I dream of the stairs still. I'm always on the fourth step, hearing my own footsteps above me, and then the groan. Not of wood this time, but something breathing in the walls. I wake up with splinters in my socks and mud on the bedroom floor. But I haven't gone back. Not really. Just sometimes. I hear that echo when I walk the hallway. One step behind. One beat off. I woke to bird song and frost on the inside of the tent, though it hadn't dipped below freezing when we fell asleep. We were camped near Shelton Laurel in Madison County, North Carolina, just a weekend out with 2 friends from college. Nothing serious. I'd taken the spot closest to the stream, where the rocks hummed soft and cold all night, when I unzipped my sleeping bag. The first thing I noticed was how stiff my left hand felt. Then I saw the string. A thin red thread had pierced through the skin of my ring finger near the knuckle, like a needle had pulled it straight through bone while I slept. It didn't bleed. The string was taut, tight enough that I couldn't pull it free without slicing myself open. I thought maybe I'd gotten snagged on something, or someone was playing a sick joke, but the hole was too clean. I reached to tug it, gently at first. It didn't budge. I braced the finger and pulled harder. But the pain shot down into my wrist, deep and sudden, like it was anchored to something inside me. That's when I noticed the direction it pointed. The red string disappeared into the earth, straight through the thin layer of leaves and into soil I hadn't disturbed. Like it had always been there. I stepped outside, cradling the hand, and called to Sarah and James. They were already up, boiling coffee over the stove and laughing about a dream James had. When they saw my face, they both went quiet. I held out the hand, showed them the thread. James reached out, touched it, and pulled his hand back fast. "It's warm," he said, voice lower. "Too warm." Sarah fetched a flashlight and knelt by the spot where it vanished into the ground. The beam followed the line maybe an inch beneath the topsoil, then deeper, curling away into the dark like a root system. "It goes far," she whispered. We tried cutting it. Scissors, a knife. Nothing worked. The blade skated across the thread without nicking it. We considered hiking out and getting help. But the nearest town was hours away, and I couldn't walk more than a few feet before the tension yanked hard enough to nearly dislocate the joint. So we stayed. Sarah tried to trace the path of the string through the woods, walking with the flashlight low and slow. After a while, she shouted back that it split, veering off at strange angles, weaving through roots and under stones, too intricate, too deliberate. As night came, the thread began to hum, not loud, not even audible, but vibrational. I felt it in my teeth and spine, a pulsing warmth that rose in waves. That's when James noticed something else. He asked if I had a scar on my shoulder. I didn't. But there, beneath my collarbone, another red thread had surfaced. Not pierced, not sewn grown, like it had pushed outward from beneath the skin. Shorter, but unmistakably the same. I pressed on it and gagged. Not from pain, but from the sensation of it moving, retracting slightly, like it didn't want to be touched. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw roots made of thread winding through the soil, curling around stones, wrapping bones. At some point, I looked out and saw James standing by the stream, eyes locked on the ground. When I joined him, he didn't look up. "It's not just under you," he said. "It's under everything." He showed me the map he'd been drawing, trying to follow the string's path. It didn't make sense as a trail, but it did look familiar. The pattern almost matched the lines of an old family quilt I remembered from my childhood. One my grandmother used to say was stitched from the earth. The next morning, Sarah was gone. Her gear was there, her boots, but her sleeping bag was empty, and the zipper was drawn shut from the inside. We followed the trail, calling for her, but found no tracks, only more of the thread. Thinner now, branching like veins. One line trailed off toward a hollow in the hill and old root cellar, half collapsed. James went in first and came back pale, holding something, a photo, one I'd never seen before. It was me, maybe 6 or 7 years old, playing in a creek. Sarah was in the background, but I hadn't met her until college. I think the thread remembers. Not just me, but places, moments, people I've touched. It's not just pulling me down, it's tying things together. Last night, I tried to sever it again. I took a fire-heated blade to it. The pain dropped me. But worse, James started screaming. He'd been nowhere near me. But he dropped too, clutching his own arm. When we looked, a red mark had formed across his wrist. Not a thread, a seam. I don't know what happens if I keep pulling. I don't know what's on the other end, but I feel it getting closer. Not the thread to whatever it's attached to. I've stopped trying to run. Instead, I listen. And sometimes, Late at night, I swear I can hear a voice from beneath the soil. It's soft, slow, almost gentle, and it's calling my name like it's always known it. By the third morning, the red thread had grown, not just lengthened, but multiplied. More lines emerged from beneath my skin, one down my spine. Another curled around my ankle, like a cuff. Each one traced outward into the forest soil, always sinking into the same dark direction. I couldn't tell if they were forming something, or if I was being unraveled slowly. James stayed close, watching me with a mixture of fear and fascination, like I'd become part of the terrain. We hadn't spoken Sarah's name since the root cellar. Her voice had echoed once he swore he heard it behind him when he stepped near the creek. But when he turned, nothing. That night, the thread tightened, not from movement, but from anticipation. I could feel something waiting at the other end, just beneath the surface, tugging ever so slightly like it knew I was ready. I stood at the edge of the clearing, arms slack, the weight of those threads drawing me into the dirt like marionette strings. I don't remember deciding to follow them, but I did. My legs moved on their own, and James shouted, grabbing my shoulder. I turned and looked him in the eye, but it wasn't me that answered. I heard my voice say, "She's almost home." Only I didn't mean Sarah. I meant whatever waited beneath. We walked in silence for what felt like hours. The thread guided us through parts of the forest that didn't feel mapped slopes too steep. Rocks arranged in impossible symmetry. Trees with bark that peeled in the shape of letters I didn't recognize. Each step grew heavier. I could feel the thread now, not just in my flesh, but in my thoughts tightening around memory, squeezing through old griefs and forgotten moments. I remembered the quilt again, my grandmother humming as she stitched, the pattern she followed without looking. I asked her once how she knew what came next. She'd said, "The fabric always remembers where it wants to go, eventually." The path ended at a sinkhole, not a sudden drop, but a slow spiral, like the earth had exhaled and left its lungs collapsed inward. Thread pooled there like veins, pulsing with faint warmth. In the center was a figure, vaguely human, entirely still, wrapped in the same red cords, but aged, brittle like it had been waiting decades. The threads from my hand connected to its chest, disappearing into a knot where its heart would be. It looked familiar, too familiar. I stepped closer, and it lifted its head, slowly. Without breath, its eyes were mine. James screamed behind me, but it was distant, like hearing someone shout from underwater. The figure didn't speak, but I felt the words. They pressed into my chest, unspooling through the red cords, right into thought you were never just yourself. Around us, the ground pulsed, and from the soil rose more threads, millions of them, forming lattices, webs, roots not of plants, but of memory. I saw my own life played out in reverse, each touch, each sorrow, tied to something older, each thread a tether, looping through places I didn't remember visiting, people I didn't remember loving. I staggered back, but the threads held fast. James dragged me from the edge. He didn't say anything, just pulled and pulled until I could breathe again. We left the sinkhole behind, but not the threads. They didn't retract. They simply went quiet. When we returned to the camp, everything was gone. No stove, no tent, no footprints, just the dirt, freshly turned, as if no one had ever been there. James sat with his back against a tree, quiet. Then he held up his hand. A single red thread had formed just beneath the skin of his palm. I saw the moment he felt it, the realization, the weight. We don't talk anymore. Not really. We check in. But neither of us says what we're thinking. That the threads are still growing, that they're reaching outward. That the voice in the ground still calls every few weeks, soft as sleep. I wake some mornings with dirt under my nails and memories I don't recognize. Sometimes I see Sarah in the corner of my vision, just beyond where the thread points. She never looks back, just walks, as if following something I can't see. Maybe she's part of it now. Maybe we all are. And still, the string remains, thin, quiet, but always warm. ChatGPT said I was parked at a gravel pull-off near Roan Mountain, Tennessee, one of those forgotten stretches where the trees crowd close and the radio turns to static. It was just past midnight, and I'd driven 14 hours straight, trying to make up time on a haul-in that shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. I was bone-tired and had just killed the engine when I saw the man. He stood at the far end of the lot, near the edge where the dark thickens. No truck, no car, just a silhouette in a brown coat and wide-brimmed hat, lit faintly by the orange flicker of a distant sodium lamp. I thought maybe he needed help. I rolled down the window halfway and called out. He turned, and I froze. His face looked carved, not old. Exactly, but deep. Lines that didn't follow the shape of aging, but something else, like erosion. He said something, but the words came wrong, not garbled or slurred, but reversed, like someone had recorded his voice and played it backwards. I didn't respond at first, just stared. Then he repeated it clearer this time. Still reversed. The cadence was familiar. My skin crawled. It sounded like my own voice. I stepped out of the cab, boots crunching gravel, and asked again if he needed anything. The man smiled, faintly crooked, thin, and spoke again. I recognized the phrase. It was something I'd thought moments before while pulling off the road. 10 more miles, and I'm free. But he hadn't heard me say it. I hadn't said it out loud. I just thought it. The man said it back to me, but in rewind, like a tape winding backwards through my skull. And then another phrase, one I hadn't even formed yet, but knew was about to rise. Don't trust the second mile marker. That one stopped me cold. Because I was about to think it, I took a step forward. He mirrored it. Not in real time. He stepped back as though reversing my movement. A playback rewound at the exact speed I had moved. I turned and walked to the edge of the pull-off. And he turned his back, walking backward toward the trees in perfect reverse of my steps. The moment I paused, he did too, frozen mid-stride. I called out again, but the words sounded strange in my ears now, like the shape of them echoed wrong. He tilted his head and whispered something that made my stomach knot. My mother's voice, but also mine, layered and reversed, saying, "You already missed the turn." I backed toward the truck, not taking my eyes off him. The longer I looked, the more I noticed small distortions around him, light bending subtly, like heat shimmer. The world near him seemed caught in rewind too. A moth that had flown near the lamp flickered backward, returning to a branch it had left seconds before. My own breath fogged and retreated toward my lungs. I fumbled for the cab door, but it wasn't where I left it. My truck had shifted, slightly, subtly, as if the memory of where I'd parked it didn't match reality anymore. I turned back to the man. But he was closer now. No footsteps, just nearer, like he'd cut through time instead of space. His lips moved, and I heard the same sentence again, my voice, reversed, but layered with others. Thoughts I hadn't had yet. One from next week, I was sure of it. One from when I was 13, staring at my grandfather's closed casket. One I hadn't even formed yet. But I knew I would. I don't know how. I just knew. The air grew still, heavy with the pressure of silence. Not absence of sound, but the tension of it. Like something was waiting for me to respond in a language I didn't know how to speak. I finally asked, shakily, "What are you?" The man smiled again, only this time. I heard his reply both forward and backward at once. "Echo," he said, and in rewind. "Okay." Then something else, a phrase I'm still trying to forget. "We rewind until you forget you're here." I don't remember getting back into the truck, only that I was driving. Headlights too bright, engine too loud. The road didn't feel familiar anymore. Mile markers looked out of place. The second one had a gouge across the number, like something had tried to erase it. I drove until morning and didn't stop. But I heard my own voice in the static of the radio later. Clear as day, playing backward, "You weren't supposed to see him." I didn't sleep when I got to the motel, just sat on the edge of the bed with the lights off, trying not to think. But the problem was, my thoughts didn't feel like mine anymore. Every time I tried to hold on to one, I'd hear it repeat, backwards, before I'd even finished forming it. I tested it, thought about calling my sister. 5 seconds later, the bathroom fan let out a faint whir, and underneath it, in the hum, I heard her name in reverse. I switched the television on for noise, but every channel seemed off by a fraction, as if the words had been dubbed seconds before the actors moved their lips. I changed the channels so fast, my thumb blistered from the heat of the remote. I thought about that man again, the way he had mirrored me, how his presence had unspooled something silent and mechanical in my brain. I wondered if I'd ever really seen him, or if he was just a point of reflection for something deeper, something older. That night, I recorded myself speaking just to hear a voice I could trust. I played it back. At first, it sounded normal. But then, somewhere near the end of the file, there was a pause, and then my voice again. Reversed, layered with others. Not echoes of what I'd just said, things I hadn't recorded. "Don't stop driving," it said. "He can only catch you if you stay still." I started noticing gaps in my memory after that. Not blackouts, exactly more like something had been taped over. I'd drive for 2 hours and not remember the turns. I'd blink and realize I'd skipped entire stretches of conversation with dispatch. One night, I looked down at my logbook and saw a note in my handwriting I didn't recall writing, "Pull off before Roan. Do not repeat." The letters were darker, like the pen had been pressed too hard, and the ink ran slightly. I flipped the page. Nothing. But the back of that same page held a drawing lines intersecting like roads, or veins, or tape reels. The dream started soon after, always the same. I'm standing on a road that loops into itself. Mile markers counting backward. A man standing just ahead of me, mouthing words I can't understand. I try to walk toward him, but the road folds like film in a projector, warping and bubbling until I fall through it. Every time I wake up, The room is cold, and the radio is on, though I never turn it on anymore. Sometimes I hear my name. Sometimes I hear silence pretending not to be silence. Last week, I stopped near Boone to refill and stretch my legs. I passed a diner window and caught my reflection. Oh, only it wasn't a reflection. It didn't match. My mouth was moving a half second after I'd stopped speaking. I stared. The reflection looked at me like it was waiting for a cue. Then it smiled and said, without sound, "We're almost caught up." I staggered back and nearly dropped the coffee. When I looked again, it was just me. But I couldn't remember if I'd ever had that jacket before, or if the patch on my sleeve was always that shape. I haven't driven through Roan Mountain again. I take long detours, even if it costs me days. But every now and then, I see that same brown coat in rearview mirrors, even in places it couldn't be. I've stopped listening to music. Every melody sounds like a Backwoods hymn now. A funeral chorus played through water. When I sleep, I dream and rewind. I taste thoughts before I think them. I see shadows from places I haven't visited yet. The scariest part isn't that he mirrored me. It's that I'm beginning to mirror him. My voice, some nights, sounds like tape winding down. And when I say things out loud, sometimes people flinch as if I've said something terrible, when all I meant was hello. A dispatcher told me yesterday that I already called in, 5 minutes before I did. Said I asked for a new route. Said I was crying. But I don't remember that. I don't cry. Now I record myself once a day, just to check if I'm still whole, most nights. It's fine, but sometimes I play it back and the voice tells me things. Things I haven't done yet, places I haven't been. And it always ends the same way. My voice reversed, whispering, one of us has to forget. I found the mailbox on a Monday. It hadn't been there the day before. And I was sure of that. I hiked the Pine Hollow Trail in West Virginia almost every weekend. Always starting from the same empty lot, always passing the same rusted trail sign half swallowed by ivy. But that morning, just off the gravel near the tree line, stood an old green mailbox on a single crooked post. No address, no house, just there. I almost walked past it, assuming it was some strange art installation or maybe trail maintenance gone eccentric. But something about the way it leaned expectant almost made me stop. The box creaked when I opened it, louder than seemed possible for such a small thing. Inside was a single envelope, no stamp, no markings, just my name, handwritten in black ink. I stared at it for a long time, thinking maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else shared my name. But the handwriting, it was mine. I opened the letter slowly. The paper felt oddly warm, like it had been sitting in sunlight, though the forest was still shaded and cold. The words described a childhood memory I hadn't thought about in years, a treehouse my father helped me build. The smell of cedar planks, the wasp sting that made me cry on the second day. I laughed at first. It was too weird to be unsettling. I figured maybe someone from town was playing a prank, or I'd scribbled it years ago and forgotten. But the details were too sharp, too precise. The letter mentioned a song I'd been humming, the exact shirt I'd worn, and how the hammer had slipped from my hand and cracked the railing. That wasn't public memory. That was mine. I took the letter home and shoved it in a drawer, unsure why I was suddenly sweating. The next morning, there was another letter. Same mailbox, same envelope, same handwriting. This one described the time I lost my dog in the woods behind my childhood home. Not just the event, but the emotion, the panic, the breathlessness. It ended with a sentence I hadn't spoken aloud in 20 years. If he's dead, I don't want to go back inside. I felt the old fear curl back into me like smoke. That's when I realized these weren't just memories. They were unremembered memories. Pieces of myself I hadn't accessed in decades. Not buried, forgotten, or something had made me forget. By the fifth letter, things began to shift. The events it described hadn't happened yet. One talked about meeting a woman in a bookstore and laughing over a misfiled horror novel. That afternoon, I went into town to shake off the creeping dread. I ducked into a little secondhand shop I'd never noticed before. And there she was. Same book, same joke. It played out word for word. I didn't tell her. I didn't want to scare her. But inside, something nodded. Like the mailbox wasn't just remembering, I was becoming something it had already read. The letters kept coming. Every day, like clockwork. I stopped hiking the trail, but it didn't matter. The mailbox moved. It appeared on my street, near the grocery store, once, inside the fenced-in yard behind my apartment. Though the gate was still locked, I tried ignoring it, but that only made the letters stranger. One described me reading a letter and pretending not to care, then tearing it up and burning the pieces in my sink, which I did, the next night, down to the exact moment the fire alarm chirped once, then went silent. I told a friend, finally. He laughed until he saw one of the envelopes. His face drained of color. "This looks like your handwriting," he said, quietly. I nodded, but not just your handwriting, your hand. Like you wrote it while dreaming. That stuck with me, because I'd been sleeping worse. Long stretches of nothing, then sudden, vivid flashes. In one dream, I watched myself open a mailbox carved into a tree trunk. Inside was a letter made of bark. It read, "Soon. You'll be back where you started." Then the final letter came. I knew it was the last one without even opening it. My name wasn't on it this time. Just the words, "You remember now." Inside, the page was blank, but the second I touched it, I saw it all, not in words, but in flashes. I remembered being lost in the woods as a child, for longer than anyone knew. Remembered something finding me, something that spoke not in voices, but in echoed feelings. I'd promised it something. I'd forgotten the terms, but now I remembered. And the mailbox was its way of collecting. I walked into the woods that night, past Pine Hollow, past the markers. The trail bent in ways it shouldn't have. Trees leaned differently. The air was thick with the weight of memory being rebuilt. I didn't bring anything with me, just the last letter. And when I reached the old clearing, where the trail once ended, the mailbox was already there, waiting, open. It wasn't nailed to anything this time, just standing freely in the middle of the clearing, as if the earth itself had decided to let it rest there. I approached slowly, heart thudding not from fear, exactly, but recognition. This was where it had started. I couldn't say how I knew, but I did. The trees were taller than they should have been, too symmetrical, leaning in with an almost deliberate hush. The air shimmered faintly, like heat off pavement, though the night was cold. When I touched the lid of the mailbox, I didn't feel metal. I felt pulse, subtle, steady, like a second heartbeat waiting for mine to match. Inside, there was no letter, just a key. Small, old, green with corrosion. I turned it over in my palm and felt a prick of pressure behind my eyes, like the memory was trying to push its way out. And then it hit me, not a moment, but a cascade. I remembered being here before, maybe 10 years old, maybe younger. I'd been missing for 3 days. The town had searched. My parents had cried on local news. But I hadn't been scared. I'd been here, reading letters, writing them. But they weren't made of paper back then. I'd written them in ash, in mud, in whatever the woods had given me. And something had listened. I stepped back, and the mailbox creaked shut on its own. The key grew hot in my hand. I looked around the clearing and realized I couldn't hear anything. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. Just my own breath, and something just beneath it. A sound like turning pages. It was all returning. I wasn't just reading memories, I was delivering them. I had been, for a long time, maybe always. I dropped the key, but it didn't fall. It hung there in the air for a moment, then drifted down slower than gravity allowed, as if the rules of the forest had softened. When I turned to leave, there was a path I didn't remember, a corridor of trees pressed so tightly their trunks formed a kind of tunnel. At the end was a faint, pulsing light. I should have run, should have fought whatever pull was tightening in my chest. But I walked forward instead, drawn not by fear, but familiarity. Every step brought back more. I remembered names, faces, letters I'd written in sleep, left under pillows, slid behind mirrors. They weren't for me. They never were. I was the mailbox. I was the one who remembered when others wanted to forget. The tunnel ended in a mirror, not a reflection, but a surface that shimmered like water and glass. In it, I saw myself as a child, holding the same key, smiling. But his eyes weren't mine. They were older, deeper. He reached out and placed his hand on the inside of the glass, and without thinking, I matched it. The moment our palms met, I felt the last piece fall into place. This was the moment I'd been riding toward. This was the promise I'd made. The mirror cracked, then rippled outward, and suddenly I was nowhere, or everywhere. Just a network of moments, old mailboxes on forgotten roads, childhood memories half recalled in fever dreams, photographs with people just out of frame. I felt myself scattering into them, not dying, remembering, returning to the thing that held it all. The letters hadn't been warnings. They were invitations, proof that memory could be a doorway if shaped just right. And as I dissolved into that light, I understood the last message, the one I hadn't dared to write, the one I'd left inside myself for too long. You're not supposed to remember the mailbox. You're supposed to become it. We found the mirror halfway through the spruce knob loop, tucked between two massive boulders where the trail narrowed and the trees bent inward like they were watching. It shouldn't have been there. A full-length mirror with a thick wooden frame, leaning against the stone as if someone had carefully placed it for us to find. No signs of weathering, no cracks, not even dust. Just glass that reflected too well, too sharp. I remember stopping short, laughing nervously, thinking it had to be part of some weird art installation. But nothing about it felt whimsical. There were 3 of us, Nate, Aaron, and me. We were halfway through a week-long backpacking trip. Deep enough in that cell service was gone, and the forest felt sacred. We hadn't seen another hiker all day. I reached out first, brushing my fingertips along the glass. It felt normal, cool, and smooth. But when I looked up, really looked, I saw something wrong in the reflection. Not with the mirror. With us. We looked older, not just tired or dirty from the hike. Nate's beard was streaked with white. Erin's face was thinner, more worn, and my own eyes had that soft hollowness I remembered in my father's face just before he passed. We stood there for a long moment, caught between disbelief and dread. Nate laughed, said it had to be some kind of trick, maybe a double-paned lens or a camera setup. But we checked. No wires, no backing, just the mirror. Erin took a photo with her phone. The image came out blank. White screen, no reflection, just light. I stepped back, uneasy, and that's when I noticed the woods behind us hadn't changed in the reflection. The trees still waved in the same breeze. The light still filtered the same way. But our shadows were missing. Erin moved closer and reached out again. This time, her hand stayed against the glass longer. "I feel something," she whispered. It's pulling." Nate reached to grab her wrist, and the moment he touched her, the mirror flipped. Not physically, just reversed. Our reflections were now facing away from us. We saw the backs of ourselves, standing in forest that looked the same, but wrong. The light behind them was darker, more copper than gold. And in the reflection, there was a fourth figure. None of us moved. The fourth one didn't either. It just stood behind my reflection, too tall, head tilted as if watching. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone behind me. Nothing. When I looked back, the mirror had changed again. This time, only one reflection remained mine. But older, so much older. My hair thin and gray, my eyes unfocused. I was standing in the same position, wearing the same clothes. But my reflection looked tired, like it had been waiting a long time for me to return. We tried to leave, tried to mark the path with our knives, break twigs, set waypoints. But when we circled back, intending to leave the mirror behind, it was still there. Not where we left it. It had moved again, closer to the trail, like it wanted to follow. Erin said it felt like we were being watched. Nate refused to look at it again. He muttered something about time, how it didn't feel like a line anymore. I checked my watch. The second hand was moving backward. Slowly, but definitely backward. We made camp early, hoping the night would give us space to think. But I kept seeing the reflection in my mind, those older eyes. Not scared, not even angry, just tired, as if something had lived too long in the wrong version of me. That night, Nate disappeared. One moment he was by the fire, drinking tea. The next, gone. No sound, no movement. His pack still there, boots still warm. Erin screamed his name into the dark until her voice gave out. We found the mirror again the next morning. It was standing upright now, no longer leaning. And this time, we didn't see our reflections at all. Just forest. But the forest inside the glass moved when we didn't. Branches swayed out of sync with the wind. Leaves shook to a rhythm we couldn't hear. And in the far background of that mirrored world, we saw Nate walking away from us, slow and steady, deeper into that other forest. We shouted, banged on the glass. Nothing. I don't know what the mirror is. A window, a trap, a warning. But it's still out there. And sometimes When I pass a reflective surface too clean, too still, I look just a little too long, waiting for my reflection to move without me. ChatGPT said we didn't speak much after that. Erin barely touched her food. I watched her stare into the flames that night like she was trying to burn the image of Nate walking away from her mind. But it wouldn't go. Not for either of us. Sleep came in fragments, broken by strange sounds, branches snapping in no direction we could trace. Whispers carried low on the wind that sounded like our names, but clipped short. Like half-memories. I dreamed of mirrors again. Not just the one in the woods, but hundreds lining hallways, buried in soil, tucked behind the bark of trees like rot. Each one showed me a different version of myself. Some withered, some younger, all watching me like they were waiting for me to catch up. In the morning, Erin was gone. No sign of struggle, no prints leading away from camp. Just her pack sitting neatly beside the cold fire pit and, beside it, her phone. The screen was still lit, the last photo taken hours before we'd woken. It was of me, asleep. But the timestamp was wrong, dated 5 years into the future. My face looked almost exactly the same, except for a white scar beneath my left eye, one I didn't have yet. I dropped the phone, heart hammering, and looked around the clearing. I was alone. The forest had never felt so silent. I tried retracing our route, but the trail had changed. The boulders were no longer there. The trees had shifted, now standing in tight patterns like ribs or prison bars. I walked for hours and found myself back at the same spot where the mirror had first appeared. But this time, it wasn't leaning against stone. It was freestanding, anchored to the earth with roots curling around its base like it had grown there. I looked inside and didn't see myself at all. Just a dark corridor lined with mirrors stretching into infinity, each surface flickering like candlelight. And walking that corridor, slowly, was a version of me, older again, bent slightly, dragging a hand along the wall. His mouth moved, but I couldn't hear the words. I think it was praying. I turned to run, to get away from whatever this was. But every time I looked up, I was somewhere new. Not dreamlike, not jarring, just wrong. The forest folded behind me, paths reappearing in shapes I didn't recognize. I stopped at one point and screamed, voice tearing into the silence, hoping someone might hear. Instead, the air behind me shimmered, and I heard my own voice call back, "Found you." But when I turned, there was no one there. Time began to loosen. I'd walked for what felt like hours, but the sun stayed locked in place. I started seeing myself in reflections where they didn't belong, pools of still water, the glass of my watch, even in the blade of my knife, always older, always waiting. I began to understand. The mirror didn't show the future or the past. It showed the version of you that kept walking, the one that didn't turn away. And once you saw it, it remembered you, marked you, drew you forward like gravity. Eventually, I stopped fighting it. I returned to the clearing, found the mirror still waiting, humming faintly like breath. I stood in front of it, and my reflection finally matched. Same clothes, same scar beneath the eye. My mouth moved, and the reflection moved with it, not delayed, not wrong, just tired. I placed a hand on the glass. It was warm, and then, slowly, it gave way. I don't know if I stepped through or if it stepped into me. All I know is I'm still walking that corridor now, the one with endless mirrors on either side, each one a possible self, a branch of what I was and what I could be. Some scream when I pass, others weep, A few smile, just barely. But they all look like me. I'm not sure if I'll ever stop walking, or if that's the point. Maybe the mirror wasn't a trap at all. Maybe it was a place you return to once the forest decides you've looked long enough. It started just before winter set in. Every morning around dawn, I'd hear someone call my name low and close, like they were standing just behind the bedroom wall. But no one was ever there. At first, I thought it was a neighbor's radio echoing weirdly across the holler. Maybe some voice carried strange by the hills in Clay County. But then I heard it from inside the house. Then, inside the room. I live alone. Been that way for years. No family left. No real friends to speak of. Just me, the house, and the woods pressing tight on all sides. I began waking up at the exact same time every morning, 5:13. Always 5:13. The voice would whisper my name once. Just once. Caleb. Not pleading, not loud, just enough to open my eyes. I tried sleeping in different rooms, even the shed out back. Didn't matter. The voice followed, always from inside. I thought maybe I was cracking a little. Years of isolation will do that. But then, during a bad coughing spell, I felt the voice come from deeper, not around me, within me. I told a doctor. He laughed, said it was probably stress, or maybe some kind of waking dream cycle, but I insisted. So he ran tests, CT scans, blood work, all clear. Healthy lungs, clear sinuses. Nothing that would explain what came next. Out of frustration, the doctor humored me, placed his stethoscope against my chest, and told me to breathe. I did. He frowned, adjusted the bell, pressed again, then went still. He didn't move for 10 seconds. Then slowly looked at me and said, "There's another voice in your chest. It's not just echoes." I laughed, thought he was joking, until he added, "It said your name." And then it said, he doesn't remember yet. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, hand pressed to my chest like I could catch the voice in the act. Around 5:00 a.m. I felt it again, not heard felt, a vibration in my ribs, not unlike a second heartbeat, but slow, thoughtful. Then came the whisper, "Caleb." But this time, it added something else. "Brother." The word hit me wrong, sharp and wet, like it didn't belong in my throat. I sat up gasping. My chest burned like I'd swallowed smoke. The voice had shifted. It wasn't just calling me. It was living there. I went to a specialist, one of those sound neurologists. She hooked me up to a dozen machines and told me to speak, breathe, hum. She recorded everything. When she played it back, the main track was normal, but underneath it, faint and garbled, was a second waveform, a voice overlapping mine by milliseconds. She isolated it, cleaned it up, played it aloud. It was my voice. But the words were unfamiliar. "He's not ready, but we are." The doctor turned white, said she'd never seen anything like it. She offered to refer me to a psychologist. I didn't go. That night, the voice didn't wait until morning. It spoke just after midnight, louder this time. "You're remembering too slowly," I shouted back at myself. At the ceiling, at whatever was nesting in my chest. I demanded to know what it wanted. There was silence. Then, two voices replied, one calm, one bitter, both mine, to finish what we started, and the other, to make sure you don't. I doubled over. Something beneath the ribs twisted, like a rope pulling taut across bone. I started writing things down. Not memories, but impressions Places I'd never been. Names I didn't know. Symbols I'd wake from dreams, drawing into the condensation on my windows. 3 circles, a line between them, always the same shape. The voice said it was a boundary, a seal, something I'd agreed to carry long ago. And now it was cracking. I remembered flashes, wet stone underfoot, the sound of something humming beneath the earth, and a promise made with a whispered reply, "Yes, I'll keep it buried." Now the voices argue. Not every day, but more often. One tells me to leave to walk into the woods and let the forest take it back. The other says I've come too far, that the seal can't be remade without me. I don't know who to trust. I barely trust myself. My lungs ache constantly now, not from sickness, but from pressure, like whatever's in me is outgrowing its home. And every morning at 5:13, I still hear it. Caleb. Then a breath. Then brother. Sometimes I respond. Sometimes I don't. But the voices are growing clearer. And I've started speaking back, not in my voice, but theirs. Last night, I recorded myself sleeping. I set up an old tape recorder next to the bed, not digital. Something with weight and hiss. Something that felt real. I didn't expect much. I've never been a sleep talker. But when I played it back this morning, the first thing I heard was breathing. Not mine. This was deeper, slower, like someone trying to mimic the rhythm of a human chest, but just slightly off. Then the voice came. My voice. Unmistakably. But rougher, it said. I held it when you couldn't. But now it's yours again. I've stopped trying to explain it to anyone. People look at me the way you look at a cracked mirror, careful, distant, waiting for a break that already happened. I tried sending the tape to a friend, an old college buddy who used to study sound design. He called me 2 hours later, barely whispering. Said there were layers beneath the voice, not just distortion, but harmonic shadow. It's not just one voice in there, he said. It's a structure, a duet. Then he hung up. I haven't heard from him since. The dreams have changed too. They used to be voices, forests, spirals of breath and soil. Now they're memories I can't tell from real ones. I see myself in places I've never been, standing beside a man who looks like me, but not quite. Taller, older, eyes like deep water. In the dream. We're building something circular, sealed in stone, with markings that pulse when we touch them. He calls me brother too. And in that dream, I answer, not with fear, but with understanding. Like I've done it before. This morning, I found writing on my bathroom mirror. I hadn't touched it. No condensation, no fog, just the phrase etched faintly into the glass, like from the inside. He's almost through. I checked every door, every window. Nothing disturbed. The trees outside were still. But I heard something beneath the floorboards, 3 knocks. Not loud, not demanding, just steady. I pressed my hand to the wood, and the floor felt warm, almost like breath, like something waiting for permission to surface. I've begun to wonder if I was ever alone in this body. If the silence I thought I'd chosen by living this way was never silence at all, just the time it took for the echo to arrive. Some mornings, I find myself whispering answers I don't remember hearing questions for. Other times, I wake up mid-sentence, halfway through a conversation that feels like it's been going on for years. And always, that name brother spoken with sorrow, not menace, like it's trying to remind me we made a promise neither of us wanted to keep. I tried walking out once, deep into the woods behind my house. No phone, no compass, just let my feet carry me. After 2 hours, I realized I was tracing a pattern, the same one I kept seeing in dreams. Circles within circles, woven with roots and hollow places where the air felt wrong. I came upon a clearing I've never seen before. In the center was a small pit, ringed in moss and stone. I stepped to the edge and felt the voice rise, not from above, but from below. Not loud, not pleading, just a single word: return. I don't remember walking home, but I woke up in my own bed, soil under my fingernails, shirt damp with morning dew. The clock read 5:13. I was already sitting up, and for the first time, the voice didn't come from my chest, it came from my mouth, spoken aloud, with no memory of forming the word. "Brother," I said, and for a brief, frozen second, I felt at peace, like something had aligned. Tonight, I'll go back to the clearing. I don't know what waits there, or what I promised to bury so long ago, but I know this: what lives inside me isn't a stranger. It's the part of me I locked away, the echo I gave a name to, so I wouldn't have to carry it alone. And now it wants to come home. I found the clock at a roadside market near Robbinsville, just a few miles into Graham County. The man who sold it didn't give me a price, just looked at me with tired eyes and said, "You'll know what it's worth when it starts." It was an old mantel clock, maybe late 1800s, carved oak with brass fittings, the kind that chimes with a low, patient toll. I wasn't looking for anything, just trying to keep my mind busy. My son had died 3 weeks earlier. Car accident, fog, black ice, a tree. He was 16. Beautiful. Gone. I'd been sleeping in his room most nights, like something of him might linger in the fabric. I didn't plan to wind the clock. Just set it on his desk, beneath the framed photograph of us at Lake Santaetla last summer. I told myself it was symbolic, let time move again, even if I didn't want it to. But that first night, I dreamt of him. Not as a memory or some fragmented echo. He was there, laughing, sitting at the edge of the bed, asking if I remembered the way we used to eat cereal out of mugs because we never did dishes. I woke up crying. The photo on the desk had shifted. His smile was a little wider, and his shoulders didn't look so narrow. I chalked it up to grief, to wishful thinking. But it happened again the next night. A new dream, more vivid. He was younger this time, 12, maybe 13. His voice hadn't cracked yet, and he had that cowlick he used to hate. He said, "You should take me fishing again." We never finished the last trip. I didn't wake up crying. I just watched the photo. The image had changed again. He was smaller now, holding a toy boat I'd forgotten we even owned. I checked the clock. The hands were moving backward, not fast, not in reverse, just subtly wrong. Like time had chosen a different direction while I wasn't looking. The chime rang at 3:06 a.m., exactly, once. Then silence. That night, I dreamed of him as a child, maybe 8 or 9, sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet, building a house out of dominoes. When I tried to speak, I found I couldn't. My mouth moved, but no sound came. He looked up and said, "It's okay. I already know." The photo continued to change. Day by day, smaller details faded. The background dissolved into haze. His face softened, then shrunk. His legs curled beneath him, and his smile took on that vague, gummy warmth of a toddler. I kept the door closed most of the time now. Terrified and unable to stop looking, I asked myself what I was seeing. If the clock was a window or a wound, or both. I tried to remove it, lifted it off the desk and set it in the hall. But the next morning, it was back in its place, hands moving counterclockwise. The dreams stopped being peaceful. They grew dimmer, foggier. In one, I wandered through our old house, calling for him. I found him in the nursery, curled in a crib, eyes open but silent. When I reached for him, he vanished, replaced by a bundle of blankets that pulsed faintly with heat. The photo was just a smear of color by then, and I couldn't tell if it was a child or a blur of light. I looked at the back. There was writing I hadn't put there. Thank you for remembering me backward. I tried destroying the clock. I wrapped it in a towel and took it out to the gravel drive, brought the hammer down with all the weight I had left. It didn't break, not even a crack. The second chime rang that night, 3:06 a.m. Again, I sat at the edge of the bed, waiting. This time, I didn't dream. But when I woke, the photo was gone. In its place was a small white square, slightly glossy. A sonogram, not a memory, not something I owned, but mine, unmistakably. The name printed in the corner, pending. That word haunts me more than any ghost. I never told anyone. Who would believe it time hadn't reversed? Not entirely, just his. Slowly, unmaking itself in gestures too small to see until it was too late. I kept the clock now. Not out of hope, but duty. Because something is cycling, unfolding, unborn. And whatever it is, it still remembers me. Still dreams me forward. Even as it slips back, I started hearing him again. Not in dreams, but in the walls. At first, it was laughter, faint, familiar. The kind that used to echo through the house on Saturday mornings when cartoons were on too loud and cereal spilled across the floor. Then it was footsteps, soft, bare, coming from his room, even when the door was locked and no one had entered. I'd walk in expecting silence, but sometimes the closet would be slightly ajar, or the bed sheets rumpled in the shape of a small figure. I told myself it was my mind folding inward, grief trying to fill the vacuum he left behind. But deep down, I knew better. Time wasn't healing anything. It was unraveling him, one detail at a time. The clock chimes more often now, always at 3:06 a.m., sometimes twice. Once I heard it chime 7 times in a row, slow and uneven, like the sound was dragging itself across the floor. I don't sleep during those hours anymore. I just sit at the edge of his bed, watching the photo frame where the sonogram used to be. That's gone now. 2. In its place is something new. A piece of paper I didn't put there, lined, aged, torn from a spiral notebook. A child's handwriting scrawled in blue crayon. You'll know me again when the clock stops. The house feels stretched, as if it's holding something it shouldn't. Doors lead to slightly different rooms. The hallway bends just a bit more than it used to. And when I look in the bathroom mirror some mornings, I see a nursery behind me instead of the shower. Once, I caught my reflection swaying gently, as if being rocked. I reached up to touch the glass, and for a brief second, I felt warmth press back small fingers. Not mine, not fully formed. They vanished when I blinked, but the print remained, fogging in reverse as though exhaling into my world. I called the man who sold me the clock. I'd kept the receipt, folded once in my wallet like a charm. The number was disconnected. I drove back to the roadside market, determined to find the booth, demand answers. But the lot was empty, overgrown with weeds, the way it would be if no one had used it in years. I asked around town. The clerk at the gas station squinted when I described the man. "We haven't had a vendor out there since before the pandemic," she said. "They used to sell old furniture and books. Burned down 2 years ago." I checked the date. It was exactly 3 weeks before my son's accident. The photo appeared again yesterday, only now it was blank. Just a pale, fogged rectangle with the faint outline of a mobile spinning in the background. The kind you hang above a crib. That's when I noticed the ticking had changed. Not backward, not forward, just slower, like the clock was winding down. I sat next to it and waited. Hours passed. When the final chime rang 3:06, like always, it didn't stop. It kept ringing, over and over, until the air shimmered and I heard crying from the far end of the hall. I followed the sound. Every step echoed like it came from 2 different lives. I opened the door to his room, but it wasn't his room anymore. It was a hospital. Dimly lit, quiet, filled with that antiseptic hush I hadn't smelled in years. And in the center of the room was a bassinet. I walked forward, terrified to see what was inside, but there was nothing. Just a slip of paper resting on the blanket. Wait, that's all it said. I woke up back in my own bed, the clock silent, hands unmoving. The photo frame was empty again. But this time, I didn't cry. I just sat still, listening. Because in that silence, I could hear it, his heartbeat. Not from memory, not from someplace long gone, but now, soft, persistent, inside me. Maybe, or somewhere just beyond this moment. Whatever's coming next, it's not death. It's not life either. It's something older. We shouldn't have gone into the mine. We'd known about it since we were kids just outside Bluefield, buried in the slope above the creek, sealed off by rusted gates and stone warnings. Our father used to call it the dead vein, said it hadn't produced anything but bad luck since the early 50s. My brother Owen and I waited until the last of the fog cleared that morning, packed flashlights and water, and climbed up past the old split rail. The gate was already broken, half pulled from the hinge like something had wanted out more than in. We stepped over it. The air changed as soon as we crossed the threshold, cold, metallic, and something deeper than smell, something like memory. The first 100 feet were quiet. Just the soft crunch of gravel underfoot and the slow drip of water from the ceiling. Then the tunnel widened into a chamber where rusted carts sat frozen on their tracks. That's when we heard it. My voice, echoing from deeper inside. Owen. It called. Then again, Owen, come look at this. But I hadn't spoken. I turned to him, confused. And he was pale. That's you, he said. It's your voice. We stood still, holding our breath as the sound came again. Same tone, same rhythm, perfectly me. And then, a second voice joined it. Also me, whispering low, "That one isn't me. We should have left then." But Owen stepped forward, flashlight beam cutting into the dark, his breath visible now even though the air hadn't dropped in temperature. "It's just echoing," he said, half believing it. Old voice bouncing around. But we both knew better. Echoes don't add words. Echoes don't know your name before you speak it. The deeper we walked, the more the mind felt. Aware, not haunted, not cursed, just awake. Like our presence was being measured. Remembered. Another chamber opened up, this one with the ceiling half collapsed. Our lights hit the wall, and we saw words scratched into the stone, not with tools, but with fingernails. Stay together. Don't trust your own voice. Below that, scrawled in what looked like coal ash. You arrived twice. I turned to Owen to say something, but he was already staring into the dark tunnel ahead. Frozen. Did you say something just now? He asked. I hadn't, but he looked shaken. I heard you behind me, he said, breathing. We pressed on, as if pulled by something just out of reach. The tunnel narrowed, then opened again into what looked like a meeting room, a place where miners would have gathered before their shifts. A long bench, a chalkboard, a rusted oil lantern still swinging from a chain. That's when we heard it again. This time, not an echo. A conversation. Two voices, both mine, talking about things I hadn't said but had thought about saying. Plans, secrets, regrets, things Owen didn't know, things I didn't want to know. I stepped back, mouth dry, and the voice from the tunnel said, softly, now he does. Owen looked at me like I'd betrayed him. Was that a recording, he asked? I shook my head, but the damage was done. The mine was unspooling us, replacing sound with memory, thought with sound. Every moment we'd shared was being played back out of order, mismatched and remixed until we couldn't tell what was real. I remembered Owen falling off a swing at age 6 until the voice said, that was you. I remembered our father's funeral, the silence in the car ride home until the voice said, he rode alone. Then the mimicry turned worse. I heard Owen call my name panicked, desperate. But when I turned, he hadn't spoken, his mouth hadn't moved. And then I heard my voice again, but not near, farther in, urgent. Owen, I need your help. My real brother turned to me, eyes wide. What if I'm with the wrong one? He whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I wasn't sure anymore either. We tried to turn back. We really did. But the tunnels didn't lead where they used to. Every path folded in on itself. Every echo led deeper. And the voices kept talking more now, not just mine. They bled into each other like water on old tape. One laughed, one wept. One said, there's no silence down here, only duplicates. We found a second flashlight, identical to mine. Still warm, then another pack. Then another set of our footprints, going the other direction. The last thing I remember clearly is the light dying. Not flickering, just vanishing, like it had been swallowed. I turned to where Owen had stood, and two figures faced me, one slightly off. His stance was wrong, his shoulders too straight, his smile too patient. And one of them said, in my exact voice, you picked the wrong one. But I couldn't move. I couldn't answer. I just heard the mine close its mouth behind us. There's no way to tell how long we were down there after that. Time turned soft, like the walls. The rock no longer echoed back our footsteps. It swallowed them. I remember walking, crawling, falling, all without a sense of direction or distance. Owen, if it was him, never left my side. But something about the way he moved stayed wrong. He never coughed, never stumbled. Once I called out to test him, used a nickname only we knew. He hesitated a fraction too long before answering. Just enough Eventually, we found light again. A faint blue shimmer at the end of a corridor that shouldn't have existed. The walls pulsed like a throat, veins of quartz glowing faintly as we moved forward. We emerged into a room too wide to belong to any real shaft. The ceiling was endless. Floating in the center of the space was a shape something like a pillar, but shifting, alive, around it. Sounds spun in layers. My voice, Owen's. Laughter, screams, questions we never asked aloud. The pillars shimmered, and for a moment I saw all our moments split and overlaid, playing at once. Different versions. Some where we never entered the mine, some where only one of us came back. Then it spoke not in sound, but in confirmation. I felt a pressure behind my teeth, and a sentence fell fully formed into my mind. You have been copied too many times. I collapsed, not from pain, but from collapse of meaning. I didn't know who I was anymore. I couldn't tell if I was the original or one of the echoes. Replayed so many times the seams had blurred. The voice pressed again, deeper this time. One of you must end. I opened my eyes and saw both Owens, one standing, one kneeling, both watching me. And in that moment, they were identical. I couldn't trust memory. I couldn't even trust fear. The kneeling one reached for me, and I flinched, not because I knew it was wrong, but because part of me wanted it to be. The other just stood there, breathing in sync with mine, expression blank. I reached for my flashlight, but I no longer had it. One of them did, and I ran. Not because it would save me, but because I needed the choice to still matter. The tunnel stretched and narrowed, reshaped by my panic. I heard them behind me, both of them, both calling my name, both perfect. Come back, they said. We remember everything. The voice was my own fear. I reached the surface just before sunrise, collapsing into cold air and silence. The mind behind me looked smaller than I remembered, like it had shrunk to fit a secret. Owen never came out. I filed a report. The search went on for a week, but they never found him. Not even signs of a collapse. I told the authorities we got separated, that he panicked, that the mine took him. But I never told them about the second voice, or the room of echoes, or the way I sometimes wake in the night to find my own voice whispering back to me from a few feet away. Same cadence, same breath, but just slightly wrong. Asking, always am I the one who made it out?